When I say my family forgot me, I don't mean metaphorically. I mean they literally erased me from dinners, from wills, from life. But nothing prepared me for the day they tried to cash in on my death. That's how this all started. Not with a fight, not even with a goodbye, just silence. It was the night of my mum's 56th birthday. The Monroe house was full of people, catered food, champagne, laughter. I had driven 2 hours after my shift at the bookstore just to show up with a handmade card and a scarf I saved up to buy. My brother, Jason, 28, polished, promoted, everyone's pride, stood beside Mom, laughing as she unwrapped a Cartier watch. Dad clapped like a proud auctioneer. Me? I was handed a plastic plate and quietly told, "There's a folding chair near the laundry room." It wasn't new. I was always the quiet one, the extra, the girl who paid rent in a city they'd never visited, working 2 jobs and still being called ungrateful for not texting more. That night, Mum looked me up and down once and whispered, "You didn't dress up." I was in the only decent blouse I owned. Jason gave a toast. He thanked Mum for raising a family built on excellence. He didn't look at me once. I stood in the corner behind a vase of fake tulips, wondering how someone could be blood and still invisible. I left early. No one noticed. It was raining. I had an hour drive back. My phone was at 4%, my stomach empty. I didn't see the semi-truck until it jackknifed 3 cars ahead. I slammed the brakes, swerved. Everything spun. Then, darkness. I woke up 6 hours later in a rural hospital bed, bruised, disoriented, and staring at a stranger in uniform. "Ms. Monroe?" the man said, his voice calm but cautious. "I'm Officer Mason Ray. You're lucky. The car was totaled, but you made it." I blinked, tried to sit up, pain flashing through my ribs. "What happened?" He paused. "Well, there's been a mistake. Your wallet was found near another burning vehicle. Your ID was intact, but the body inside wasn't." I stared. "What are you saying?" He looked at me gently, but firmly. "Your parents think you're dead." I laughed, or tried to. It came out like a cough. "They... what?" "They've already filed the death claim," he added, "less than 24 hours ago." It hit me like a second collision. They hadn't called hospitals. They hadn't searched. They'd gone straight to the insurance. That was the moment something inside me fractured. Not from the crash, but from the kind of betrayal you only see in revenge stories. Except this one was mine. And I wasn't done living. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just stared at Officer Mason Ray while the words, "They think you're dead," hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. "They didn't call?" I finally asked. "Not even to check?" He hesitated, which was all the answer I needed. "They filed the claim the same night," he said, softer now. "You were reported deceased on paper before your vitals even stabilized." I leaned back against the pillow, the hospital sheet suddenly too rough, too loud. A beep from the monitor behind me ticked like a countdown. Not toward my death, but toward who I used to be. I wasn't Elise Monroe anymore. To them, I was done, closed, worth exactly $1 million. And here's the thing. When someone hurts you that deeply, it's not fire you feel first. It's ice. Mason gave me options. "I can report you alive right now," he said. "Clear it up. Stop the payout." But I shook my head. "No." He raised a brow. "No?" "I want to know what they'll say at the funeral," I whispered. "I want to hear them lie with my name in their mouths, and then—" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. He understood. That's when he offered his cabin. "Off-grid," he said. "No cell service, no nosy neighbours, just quiet." So for 3 days, I stayed in a borrowed sweatshirt, staring out over a frozen lake and learning how grief doesn't always sound like sobbing. Sometimes it's silent. It just sits in your chest like a weight no one sees. I kept thinking, what kind of parent cashes in their child's life before the body's even cold? And if you've ever asked yourself a version of that, like, would they even notice if I was gone, then yeah, you know the kind of ache I'm talking about. On the third morning, Mason returned from town, silent at first. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket, a folded funeral program. My photo was on the cover, me, 13, awkward braces, and a smile I faked for a science fair. Below it read, "She was quiet, but tried. Not kind, not brilliant, not even loved, just tried." That word hit harder than the crash, because even dead, I still wasn't enough for them. And something in me started to burn, not rage, not yet, but a very specific clarity. If they wanted a ghost, they were about to get one. Only this ghost, she was coming back with receipts. I didn't sleep the night before the funeral, not because of fear. Because of clarity. There's something strange about knowing you've been erased, that you weren't even worth double-checking. It sharpens you, makes your breath slower, your heartbeat colder. I dressed simply. Black slacks, white blouse, no makeup, hair tied back low and tight. Mason handed me a badge and tucked a small recorder into my pocket. "Just in case things go sideways," he said. "You don't have to say anything. Just walk in, see what you need to see, and I'll be nearby." I nodded. No theatrics, no drama, just truth. We arrived at the church 15 minutes before the service started. I slipped through the back door, heartbeat steady, like it didn't belong to me. There was no body in the casket, of course, just a sealed box, weight added to mimic presence. Like they couldn't be bothered to even stage it well. At the front pew, my mother sat in navy silk, dabbing at her eyes with slow, exaggerated movements. If grief were theatre, she deserved a Tony. My father stood beside her, straight-backed, lips tight in what looked more like irritation than mourning. Jason, of course, was there too, shaking hands, smiling sadly, whispering quiet thanks. And next to him, a man in a suit I didn't recognize, the insurance representative. I moved quietly along the side aisle, unnoticed. Mason stayed behind, near the vestibule. As I got closer, I heard it, my father's voice, low and sharp. "The policy clears Monday, no loose ends." Jason nodded. "It's locked, no one's asking questions." "Good," Dad said. "She was a burden. This was cleaner." My hands curled into fists. They weren't grieving me. They were relieved I was gone. And Jason, he didn't look like someone who lost a sister. He looked like someone who'd won a bet. I stepped forward. 3 rows from the front, Jason saw me first. He froze, blinked, stared like I was an apparition. The insurance rep dropped his pen. My mother turned slowly, expecting maybe a late-arriving guest. Then her face drained, like someone unplugged her soul. Dad's reaction was the coldest of all. His jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. He just muttered, "You weren't supposed to be here." I stood tall. No, I was supposed to be dead, right? Silence fell like a thunderclap. People turned. Whispers rippled. I looked at Mom. "You buried an empty box. You filed paperwork while I was in a hospital bed." She gasped. We were told it was you." "No," I cut her off. "You didn't ask if it was me." Jason tried to step forward. "Elise, this isn't the time." "Shut up!" He froze. Then Mason stepped forward, calm as ever, and pulled out the recorder. Dad's words played back. "She was a burden. This was cleaner." It echoed through the chapel like judgment. That was the moment the room turned. Whispers turned to outrage. Someone stood up. And me? I didn't feel sad. I felt seen, for the first time in my life, and they had no idea. This was only the beginning. After the funeral ambush, I didn't go back to the cabin. I went to war. Mason drove us straight to the precinct, where he handed the recorder over to Internal Affairs. The moment my father's voice echoed from that audio, She was a burden. This was cleaner. Everything shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't just the invisible daughter. I was Exhibit A. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't be enough, because my parents, they were careful, slick. And Jason, he didn't even flinch when the handcuffs came out. He smirked, like he knew something we didn't. And I was right. 2 days later, Mason got a call. The insurance company said the payout wasn't filed under my mum's name after all, it was under Jason's. He was listed as the emergency financial custodian with a notarized letter of authority allegedly signed by my mother. But there was a problem. That signature? It wasn't hers. Not really. I knew because I'd seen her handwriting for 26 years. Grocery lists, birthday cards with cold notes, passive-aggressive sticky notes about the thermostat. And what Jason turned in? It wasn't even close. We ran it through a handwriting expert. The result, AI-assisted forgery. Jason had scanned old birthday cards, digitally recreated her signature, and used that to forge a document, making himself the legal recipient of my death benefits. It wasn't just fraud, it was premeditated, and it didn't stop there. I pulled out my old laptop, the one I used back in college, the one I thought was useless. Buried in an old email folder was a voicemail attachment Mum had sent 3 years ago by accident. It was meant for Dad. If Elise ever dies, just make sure Jason gets everything. She'd waste it anyway. Hearing that again didn't hurt. It confirmed what I'd always known but never let myself believe. They were waiting for me to disappear. Mason helped me build the case piece by piece. We gathered voicemail recordings, screenshots of bank transfers for support I never received, texts between Dad and Jason saying 1 less mouth, 1 more million. It was grotesque. It was undeniable. And the whole time, one thought ran through me like ice water. I wasn't just unloved, I was disposable. If this had been some stranger defrauding me, it might have been easier. But it was the people who watched me take my first steps, the ones who heard me cry as a child, the ones who told me, on their good days, that I was lucky we didn't give you up. Funny how those words sound different when you realize they meant them. You know, people talk about betrayal like it's dramatic, explosive. But real betrayal, it's quiet. It files paperwork. It signs your name on dotted lines. It smiles at your funeral. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about revenge. This was going to court. The courtroom wasn't what I expected. No dramatic chandeliers, no pounding gavels, just cold lighting, stiff suits, and a jury full of strangers who were about to hear the ugliest parts of my life. I sat with Mason beside me. He didn't say much. Just stayed there, solid, calm, like he always was. Across the aisle sat my parents and Jason. Dad stared straight ahead, arms folded like this was a boring meeting. Mum wore a soft grey suit and curled her hair. She looked like she was applying for sainthood. Jason didn't even try to fake remorse. He looked bored. The prosecutor started with the audio from the funeral. Dad's voice, crystal clear. She was a burden. This was cleaner. A woman in the jury gasped. Then came the insurance documents, the fake signature, the expert witness explaining how Jason had used AI and printer overlays to forge the authority letter. Jason still didn't blink. But the moment the prosecutor played the voicemail Mom had left years ago, if Elise ever dies, just make sure Jason gets everything. She'd waste it anyway. I saw Mum's mascara crack. It wasn't grief, it was exposure. Then it was my turn. I stood up. No tears, no voice shaking, just truth. I talked about growing up in a house where silence spoke louder than words, where birthdays were forgotten unless they were Jason's, where every achievement of mine was met with a nod, maybe, while Jason got banners and applause. I talked about the night of the crash, how no one called, no hospital checks, just a signature and a bank transfer. And then I pulled out the letter, The one I found tucked in the back of my childhood dresser. Written 6 months before the accident. Signed by my mother. If anything happens to Elise, Jason is the sole beneficiary. She wouldn't know what to do with money anyway. It would only cause problems. I ended with this. They didn't mourn me. They didn't even wonder. They just called the insurance and scheduled brunch. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was an inconvenience. And when they thought I was gone, they celebrated. The courtroom was still. Even Jason shifted in his seat. Then came cross-examination. Their lawyer tried to make me sound emotional, unstable, so I just stared at him and said, if I'm unstable, it's because I was raised by people who prepared for my death before they ever acknowledged my life. That line stayed in the room even after I sat down. 2 hours later, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts. Jason, fraud, forgery, identity theft. My parents, conspiracy, obstruction, and willful negligence. They were taken out of the courtroom in cuffs, but even as the doors closed behind them, I didn't feel victorious. Not really, because the truth is, when the people who raised you try to erase you, there's no win, no parade, there's only space, and the quiet choice of what you build next. The headlines came fast. Daughter walks into her own funeral, parents arrested for fraud. Golden boy brother caught in one mama's insurance scam. My name, Elise Monroe, was suddenly everywhere. People wanted interviews, podcasts, even a documentary deal. I said no to most of them. But one thing I didn't say no to, telling my story my way. So I wrote a memoir called Buried Alive, How My Family Tried to Cash Me In. It hit the bestseller list in less than a month. But I didn't keep the profits. I used every cent to start the Phoenix Foundation, a non-profit for young adults who were cast aside by the very people who were supposed to protect them. We offered legal support, emergency housing, scholarships, things I wish someone had given me when I was alone. 3 years later, I stood at the edge of a quiet field behind our new community shelter. A group of teens were painting a mural on the brick wall. In the centre, a woman with flames at her feet and wings rising from her shoulders. Underneath, in bold paint, it read, "You are not disposable." Mason stood next to me, hands in his pockets. "You rebuilt something they tried to destroy," he said. I shook my head. No. I built what they never could. That's the difference. And my parents? Mum tried to fake an illness in prison to get early release. It didn't work. Dad quietly took a warehouse job when he got out. I heard he tried to publish a memoir about forgiveness and redemption. No one bought it. Jason, he lost his job, his fiancée, and eventually filed for bankruptcy. He sent me one email. "I hope you're happy. You ruined our lives." I didn't reply, because the truth is, I didn't ruin anything. I just refused to stay erased. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted freedom. And I found it. Not in court, not in headlines, but in every kid who walked through our doors and realized, you are not the problem. You were just surrounded by the wrong people. That's the legacy I chose. And maybe you reading this, watching this, you know exactly what that feels like. Maybe you've been told you're too quiet, too sensitive, too dramatic. Maybe someone made you feel like you didn't belong. If that's you, tell me in the comments, what would you say if they finally had to listen? Because I promise, this time, someone's listening.